Hi, this is Paul, and welcome to Shading and Rendering. In this lesson, we're going to go over the basic process of texturing one of the panels on this crate. I'm going to go ahead and start by just turning off the visibility on some of these. We'll just work on one panel here on this front panel. And if I go in and take a look at my UV layout for this, size this down a little bit. What you can see is I have my UVs laid out in a fashion where I get all 5 of these panels laid out in the same UV space. So I can have one big texture just on this front panel, I can have one texture on the side, one on the top, and so on. So if I select all these, there you can kind of see the layout that I have going on for this. And here is that center panel. Here's the top and the sides and the bottom panels. So the first thing I need to do is I need to go in and do a UV snapshot of this so that I can have texture placement inside of Photoshop. So with all of these items selected, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go to Polygons, UV Snapshot. And I'm going to go ahead and do a 2K texture on each side of this box, on this crate. So I'll call this box front underscore out UV, and of course my project is set, so that will be placed in the images folder. I'm going to do a 2K image and I'm going to save out a TIFF file for this. So I'll go ahead and click on OK, and we'll jump into Photoshop and we'll go ahead and jump into the images folder, and there's my box front out UV right there. So go ahead and open that, and I want to set this up to where I have all these wires on one layer so I can adjust opacity and get rid of it if I don't want to see it. So I'll go ahead and go into channels, and of course when you do a UV snapshot in Maya, it automatically gives you an alpha channel as a selection. So I'll go ahead and control click on that to bring up that selection, go into layers, make a new layer, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that area with white. Now I can go into my background and fill that with black. And I want to make sure that I label everything. So there's my wires layer, and I can turn that on and off now. And as well, you can go in and adjust the opacity on this stuff. Alright, so that's set up, and I can start working on texturing now. But before I do that, we've got a couple things to consider here. If I jump back into Maya, you'll notice that this panel right here has other panels on top of it. It's got this one on top of it, and these ones as well. So what's basically going to happen here is when we start texturing, we have overlap, and we need to compensate for that. And this really goes back to just the basic lesson of kind of realizing what this box has been through, the environment that it's been in, and things that it has been subjected to. So let's say, for example, this crate has been sitting outside for a while. It's probably been in the sun, it's been in the rain, and certain parts of those elements are going to affect this box. So if this is sitting on the ground, let's say, and it has rained and there was dirt on the ground, maybe a forklift drove past it, kicked up some of that mud onto the box. Wind, dirt has probably blown against the box. So what's basically going to happen is we're going to get a dirt buildup inside of this area right here, where this little ledge sits. So we're probably going to get more dirt on this ledge than this area of the surface. And as well, we're going to get quite a bit built up in the corners. If the wind is kind of coming from this direction, maybe, we're going to get more dirt built up in this corner where it's settled in. Now, if it has been in the elements as well, especially rain, you're probably going to get water that's coming off of this ledge right here, and then is going to run down the top of this surface before it evaporates or drips down or whatever. So those are areas that we need to keep in mind. We can't just take this surface as a whole and texture it, we have to compensate for these little areas right here where there's overlap from these panels. So inside of Photoshop, of course, you can see here is that panel right here, and we know that these panels overlap this a bit. Now, by looking at this, you have no way of telling the placement of these panels on this panel. So we need to do something to get that placement inside of here, so we can keep that in mind when we're texturing. I find the best way to do this is just to take a snapshot of your screen and place this over. Now, with this view right here and with this selected, this back panel, I have a really good idea of how these ones are overlaying on top of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this as big as I can here, and I'm going to go ahead and do a screenshot. So just hit print screen on your keyboard, and I'll go ahead and jump back into Photoshop, make a new document. Whoops, I just pasted that one in there. Undo that. I'll make a new document, and I'll go ahead and paste that. And we'll kind of zoom in here, and I'm going to crop this image right where this back panel sets. So we'll go in there, and we'll bring this in like so, and I'll go ahead and crop that. Now we have an image that tells us where these panels overlay. So I'll go ahead and select all of this, I'll copy it, and I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to paste that on there, and I'm going to call this overlay just so I know what it is. And for placement purposes on here, I'm going to go ahead and make this 50% so I can see what I'm doing. Now, of course, when you're doing this on your screen, I'm working on a really small screen here for this video, but you'll probably be working on a larger screen. So when you do that screen grab, when you hit print screen, you'll probably get a larger grab of this. If it's not big enough, you can always just do a quick render of it as well. That works out. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter, because all we're doing here is just setting up a placement for this. So with this overlay selected, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control T. And I'm just going to quickly go in and scale this to fit in that region. So you see I'm just lining up the two panels. I know that this panel right here is the correct size inside of Maya, and so if I put this one right on top of it, then I know the correct size of these. Alright, so now we've got this overlay in there, so now we know where these edges reside on there, so we can start doing some texturing. Go ahead and open up a few files here that we're going to work with. Oh, let's see here. We'll open up this one first off. Now, this texture is just some pine boards that I shot in a Home Depot. And we'll go ahead and use this for the basis of our texture. I'll go ahead and select all of that, and I'll copy it. And I'm going to go ahead here and paste that in there. And I'll go ahead and call this wood base, just so I know what it is. And I'll put that down underneath all my wires and stuff so I can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to go ahead and scale this down a little bit. So for this one, I just want to make sure that I get 4 nice boards. Now you notice that this texture is actually 4 boards. So I'm going to have 4 boards that make up this front panel here. And I'm going to go ahead and overlap this a little bit. That's fine. It doesn't really matter. Because of the way I have my UVs laid out, you're not going to see that anyway. So go ahead and do that. And now I want to go in and just place this. Maybe I'll put that one back on. I really like these knots that are in here, and so I just kind of want to make sure that I like where the knots are setting on here. And I think I might go with that. I like having these knots here, this one over here. So I kind of like this configuration that we've got going. So we'll do that. Now, of course, up on top here, we don't want this showing up. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of that. So I'll just select that region and just hit delete to get rid of that. All right, so now we have our wood base done. And you can see that on there. Let's start putting some logos and stuff on here. I'll go ahead and place a logo on here. Now this logo is actually the DAC logo, and this is an Illustrator file. So what Photoshop is going to do with this is, I'm going to go ahead and lay that down first. What Photoshop is going to do is it's going to place this as somewhat like a referenced file, and you can see that by the logo down here. So essentially, if I was to change this file in Illustrator, it would update it inside of here. This, however, isn't what I want. I just want the pixel values. So what I'm going to do, just to make things easy, is I want to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this logo. Actually, I'm going to call that DAC logo, just so we know. Now, I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to Control-click on it to bring up that selection. And then on the DAC logo layer, I'm going to go ahead and just fill that with black. So now we don't have this whole referencing thing going on. We just have black pixels on here. Now, I'll go ahead and delete this. We don't really need this file anymore. All right, so there's our DAC logo. We've got that in there. Now, what we want to do is, again, kind of think about what this box, this crate has been through. And we're kind of saying that, you know, this has probably been in a warehouse for a while. It's probably sat out on the back lot, and the sun has hit it, and the wind and the rain has hit this. So essentially, through all that weathering, we're going to get some of this paint from this logo that has been stripped away. So that's kind of what we're after. Now, before I do that, now let's make sure. Now, once I pull my panels in here, I notice this logo is really, really big. So I'm going to go ahead and scale that down a little bit more, just make it a little more reasonable on there. Maybe about there. And as well, I don't really want this bar underneath here, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. Okay, so kind of thinking through the process of, again, the kind of the life of this box. Now, when this logo was painted on here, it was probably a piece of cardboard where this was cut out of it, so you get kind of a stencil going on, and it was probably spray painted on there. They probably took a nice big can of spray paint and just spray painted against that stencil, and you get this black paint on there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just draw a selection here. And so I'll go about there, and we'll say that that's what that stencil looked like. So my selection, my outline here, is the piece of cardboard right now. And what we have inside of here is what was cut out for the stencil and actually got painted. Now, with this, nothing is ever done neatly, especially, you know, something like this for a crate. You know, some guy getting paid minimum wage probably went in with a spray can and just went all over this thing to get this paint on there. So essentially what's going to happen is you're probably going to get some overspray from the paint that comes into this area right here. So what I'll do is go ahead and click on Control H to hide that selection. I'm going to grab a paintbrush, and I'm going to grab one that's feathered out pretty good, maybe somewhere in that range. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and just kind of retrace my steps here. Before I do that, however, I forgot one step, sorry. We've got this area selected. Now what I want to do is I want to reverse that selection, because right now you can see I can only paint inside of that selection. What I want to do is I want to go to select and inverse that, so now I can paint on the outside of this. You know, again, thinking in terms of painting this, right now this piece of cardboard would be masking this off. you would get paint inside of here, and evidently you would get paint outside of here from the sloppiness of the worker that's doing it. So now at this point I'll go ahead and hide that so I don't see it. Grab my paintbrush, and I'm going to go ahead and see what happens if I just kind of retrace my steps here like so, and make that look like some worker, did that, and you got some nice overspray on top of that. So we'll call that good. I might delete some of this a little bit later. That's a little bit heavy on the overspray. Guess it depends on how sloppy that worker was, really. But for now, we'll go ahead and just leave that as is. All right, so on top of that, there's probably no way that minimum wage worker got this thing perfectly centered on this box. And as well, there's probably no way that he got it perfectly straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tilt this just a little bit, because he's holding this piece of cardboard up there. There's no way he got that thing straight. So we'll go like that. All right, and I think at this point in time, I do think this is a little heavy in these areas, so I think I will go ahead and pull that down a little bit, and we'll just kind of strip a little bit of this information out of here just so it's not quite so heavy, a little bit more subtle. Maybe somewhere around there. And of course, you just notice what I did. I actually took it away from the logo as well, so I'm going to back up a couple steps and make sure that I'm only stripping it in this area. Looks like I left a little bit right here, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter. Again, this is spray painted on here, so it's not going to be perfect. All right, so we'll call that good. And I'm going to start messing with this logo here quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a duplicate of it and turn that off. And I can even, pull it up top or something just so it's out of the way. Just so you know that you have a clean copy of that if you need to go back to it. And more than likely you will need to go back to it and have that nice clean version of it. So we'll go ahead and keep that up there. Now this one, we're going to rename this, and we'll call this DAC logo paint. So this is the actual paint that went onto the box. And in order to make this blend in a little bit better, we're going to go ahead and strip some of this paint off of here. Now wood, just by nature, has areas that are more dense than others. So you kind of get little hills and valleys in the wood. The veins actually tend to be a little bit more dense wood, so they weather a little bit differently than, we'll call it the filler for lack of a better term. And now on top of that, you get a situation where the filler, being a less dense material, it's going to absorb more of the paint than the harder veins will. So we want to compensate for that when we're stripping this paint away. So what I'm going to do in order to strip that away, I'm going to go ahead and use this wood texture to do that. I'll go ahead and select all, and I'll copy it, and I'll jump into channels, and I'm going to go ahead and make a new alpha channel, and I'm going to paste that information inside of there. Now, of course, if I use this as a selection right now, we're pretty much 50% gray on everything. So we're going to run into a scenario where we're basically just stripping most of the logo away. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Control L, go into levels, and we're going to start pulling some of this stuff down here. Okay, so it looks like I'm going to have to think in reverse here because, again, the veins are going to be a more dense material. The knots are going to be a more dense material as well. So probably that paint isn't going to seep into that surface as much as it would the filler areas. So we are actually going to be reversed of what we want right now. We technically are going to want all of these areas very, very white and the other areas dark. So we'll kind of think in terms of that as we're putting this thing together. We do want to strip a little bit out of here. So I'm going to go about there, and we'll say okay. And of course we are reversed, so I'm going to do a Control I to invert that. And now you can see the white areas will be stripped away from that logo, and we'll get this nice pattern of veins running through the wood here. The knots will be stripped away where the paint didn't adhere as much as it did in the filler areas. All right, so I'll go ahead and Control click on this layer, bring up that selection. Again, Control H to hide it so I don't have to see it. I'll go back into my logo paint, and I will just hit the delete key, and you can see what we did. We stripped away that really nice in those areas. Maybe a little bit more than I would have liked in this area, but you know, again, if we want to add a little bit more to that, if it's too much, we've got a couple different things we can do. And fortunately, again, we did save a copy of this logo. So rather than use this copy, I'll go ahead and just make a copy of it. And I will call this DAC logo paint overlay, just so we know what it is. And we'll go ahead and just turn the opacity down on this one. So you can see, you can start to bring some of that dark area back in there. I don't want to do too much of it. So we'll go about there, just to give a hint of that paint still inside of there. All right, now for this one, I'm going to go ahead and alter this logo a little bit later. I'm actually going to move it around a little bit. So for that purpose, I'm going to go ahead and merge these layers back together. So I'll merge down. It'll just make it easier to move that stuff around a little bit later. So there we go. We've got our paint on our box. Now you go in, you paint this box. You've got all this weathering that's going on, wind and rain and sun and all this stuff that's stripping this off of here. That paint has to go somewhere. It doesn't evaporate, so it has to go somewhere. So what we'll do is go ahead and copy this again, and we'll call this DAC logo smear, because we're going to smear this a bit. Okay, so we'll bring this down underneath the logo paint, and we'll turn it on just so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to go over here to the smudge tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start pulling some of this paint from the smear layer here. And I'm going to just kind of start pulling some of this down. I know this is going to look a little cheesy right now, but we will fix it. Of course, you're going to want to spend more time on this than I am here. Basically, what we're emulating here is we're emulating that paint as the water and the rain has hit it, and it's actually smudged, and it's being pulled down by gravity down the surface. Kind of looks like a bad horror film logo. All right, so we'll call that good right there. That's fine. Again, you'll obviously spend more time on it than I am. Okay, so obviously that looks pretty hideous at this point in time, and if we bring our real logo back on top of it, looks terrible. So what we need to do is we need to blend this into the wood a little bit more. So this logo smear, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing around with some of my blend modes on this. And let's see here. I'm liking soft light, and I'm liking overlay. I think I like soft light the best. It's still a little too much. It's still a little too smudgy coming down there. It just looks like we did it on purpose. So of course I'm going to go down and pull the opacity down a bit. It needs to be subtle, just very subtle coming down inside of there. All right, so now on top of that, I'll go ahead and turn that off. In fact, I think I'll turn the opacity up all the way just so you can see what I'm going to do here. That paint now that has been smudged down from the rain, we're going to go ahead and strip some of that away as well. So I'm going to go in once again, control click on this, on our wood that we used. I'll go ahead and hide that, and I'll go ahead and hit delete on that. So you can see now we stripped that away just like we did the paint on the logo, and just makes it fit in there a little bit more natural. Especially in areas like this right here, you can really see these veins and how even the smudging got stripped off, probably from the sun, maybe a little bit of rain on that one as well, but again, it just makes it fit into that so much better. Alright, so we can go ahead and pull the opacity down on that one a little bit, maybe somewhere around there. Okay, so last but not least on this one, this logo, you know, we stripped it away nicely. It's still too perfect at this point in time. What happens to wood when it sets in the sun and the rain? Again, we've got more dense areas in the veins than in the filler. So what actually starts to happen is, rather than being a nice smooth surface across here when it was manufactured, some of the filler areas will start to erode a little bit. So you'll get little hills coming up on the veins, and then it kind of dips down in the filler areas, just because, again, this less dense material gets stripped away a little bit. So we get a fairly bumpy surface the older the wood gets. Now, this paint, again, it's just too perfect inside of here, and it would be stripped away into those areas a little bit. It would move around and it would shift. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to move this logo around a little bit per what we have inside of these veins and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this wood base color, and I'm going to select all and copy it. I'm going to make a new document, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that image inside of there. So there's the wood that we have setting inside of there. What we're going to do is we're going to do a displacement of pixels. So we're going to take values of pixels, and we're going to take those values and push other pixels around per what that value is. So you'll understand a little bit better in a minute. I'll go ahead and do a Control U that'll bring up hue saturation. That's image adjustment saturation. I'm going to desaturate this image. I'm going to go ahead and jump into levels, and I'm going to kind of pull these out to the bulk of the histogram here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, we have our DAC logo on there. If a value is light, like white or 255, we're going to push that pixel in a certain direction. If the value is darker, we're not going to push that pixel as much. And of course, you've got 256 levels of gray on what you're actually going to be pushing around there. So the light and dark values in here are just specifying how much a specific pixel is going to be pushed, and we'll use that as a map to do that. So I'll go ahead and click OK, and this new document, I'm going to go ahead and save this, and save it as a Photoshop file so Photoshop can recognize it. I don't want any layers in there, and I'll go ahead and save this as wood displace. And I'll go ahead and click on save. Yeah, I'll go ahead and replace it because I already had one in there. I can close this down. I don't even need to have this open. We'll bring up our logo here. Make it nice and big so you can see it. And what we're going to do with that logo layer selected, I'm going to go up to Filter. I'm going to distort this image, so it's going to be in the distort area. And I'm going to do displace. So I'm going to go ahead and push this a little further. Basically, I'm saying that if this pixel right here falls on a pixel from that displacement map that is pure white, it's going to push it 10 pixels this way and 10 pixels that way. So I'll go ahead and click on OK. Then it's going to ask you for your displacement map. Click on Wood Displace, and I'll click Open. And you can see what it does. It takes all of those values and pushes some of that stuff away. Now, obviously, that's way too much for what we want here. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And I'll jump back up in here, and we'll do this again with something a little bit more subtle, maybe like 2. Probably not a lot of movement on this thing. Probably about that. I like where that's going. Now, you can see what we did is we just kind of roughed up the edges a little bit, pushed some of this into those crevices where the filler has eroded away. All right. So we like that. There's our smear back on there. I do think this is still a little heavy on this, so I think I might go ahead and get rid of some of that information. I'm going to go ahead and grab that, my eraser tool, and I think I might just jump in here and make this a little bit more subtle on our overspray here. I mean, I'm sure that guy was sloppy when he spray painted it, but that was really sloppy. All right, so we'll call that good right there. All right, so now let's talk about grunging this thing up a little bit. Deselect that. And let's open up a few more images here. Looks like we've got some grungy files going on here. This one might be nice. We used this in the last lesson. This might be nice to get some of that grime running down from the top. And you know, we'll kind of go off the last lesson, and we'll do this one for the dirt on the bottom as well. So why don't we'll start off with those. Let's just open all these. I don't even know what these ones are. We'll find out. All right, so it looks like we've got just a couple of just overall grungy looking things. And these are great just for adding overall just spattering of dirt on top of stuff. These images are just photographs, dumpsters and grimy things that have just been desaturated, again in the hue saturation box, just pulling the saturation down. And then using levels just to pull some nice levels in there, just to give it some contrast. So I'll go ahead and pull these down a little bit, just so we can see them all. See what we have to work with here. It's hard working on this small screen. All right, that's fine. All right, we'll save this one for the dirt on the bottom. Maybe size that in just a little bit. And we'll pull that one over. All right, so let's just do an overall kind of grimy feeling to this one first. Let's maybe take this one. I like where this is going. We'll pull this on top of here. And we'll call this base grunge, just so we know what that is. You could even just call it base dirt if that's what you're after there. Just as long as you understand what it is and you know the difference. All right, so we'll go ahead and pull that over the entire thing, and we'll try. Now, you know, I know Multiply is going to get rid of the white areas, so I know that's going to do a nice job. Of course, we could go in and maybe pull the opacity down on this, maybe somewhere around there, just to give it a nice base dirtiness going on there. It's a little evenly distributed across the surface, so I think I might go in and maybe just very, very loosely get rid of some of it in the middle here, so it's more concentrated toward the outside. Now, of course, don't forget, when you're doing this, you're not going to see anything underneath these panels, so there's no sense worrying about all of this stuff underneath there. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn the overlay off, and we'll go ahead and keep that base grunge on there. Now, I'm really liking this one again, just getting that kind of feeling of this stuff starting to run down from the top. So let's take this one and dump it on there as well. And I'll go ahead and turn my overlay on just so I can see where everything's going on. And of course, you want to keep naming this stuff. I'm not going to take the time to do it now, but you want to make sure you keep naming all of this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and pull that into there. Now, of course, again, you're not going to see behind these panels, so I'm not worrying about that texture. Go ahead and double click on that. And let's try some blend modes on this, see what we get out of this. Okay, I kind of like soft light. That's giving us a nice little bit there. Hard light, I think, is altering the color a little too much. Let's see what overlay does. I'm kind of liking what overlay is doing. Now, two things that I don't like. I don't like how it's saturating the color. It's adding the orange color to it. And two, I think it's a little too subtle. I think we need a little bit more of it. So I think what I will do is go ahead into this one and I'll pull the saturation down on it. Say okay, and I'll go ahead and dupe that just so we get double that amount on there. Now with that, I notice we're picking up a lot of this white area in here. So let's try doing a multiply on this. That's not really doing much for me. So we'll come through here. I kind of like that. That looks really cool. Of course, that one is a bit too much, so maybe I'll pull that down. Now, I like what it's doing inside of here, but I don't necessarily like what it's doing in here. So maybe I could go in and adjust the levels a little bit on that. So you can see we can get some really grimy stuff going on now. This whole process is just a trial and error. Some things work, some things don't. I think it's looking a little too gritty for my taste, so I'm going to say no, I don't like that one. And I'm going to go back and see what we've got here. So there's before, there's after. And we're still getting a little bit too much white in there. So I'm still not incredibly happy on what that's doing. Ooh, I kind of like that. That's kind of fun. So I've got one set to soft light. I've got one to color burn. Maybe we'll pull this one down. And I really like what's going on there. So again, this is something you can't really plan for. I mean, I'm obviously making this up as I go here, but it's amazing what you can come up with when you just experiment with this stuff a little bit. And I think I like that right there. I think that's a good configuration. All right, so I'll go ahead and merge this down just so we have that in one layer, since we like what that's doing. And actually, notice what just happened when I did that. Because I have this one on color burn and I have this one on soft light, when I merge this down, it shifts the color a little bit and puts both of them on soft light. So I can't necessarily do that. You could leave it as is. Another way you can do it is just to make a new layer that's set on normal and then blend all of them together. I believe that will work. So let's take all three of these now and we'll merge those layers together. And actually that didn't work. So maybe we just need to keep it at this point in time, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter. So we'll delete that one. In fact, it might be kind of nice to have that control later on anyway. So, all right. I'm going to go ahead and close some of these up just so we have room. We'll close that one up. That one up. Let's see what we have here. We don't need that anymore. Don't need that anymore. Now, we could take something like this. We could pop that in there. And what we could get out of this is maybe just a kind of larger spattering of flakes that's going on here. We'll multiply that on there. Pull the opacity down. So you can see we've just added just another level of grime on there. Just added just a little bit more. It's subtle. You could even make it a little bit more subtle than that. But again, just levels of grime. This box has apparently been through a lot. It's pretty grimy. So you want to get those multiple levels of grime going on there. And again, make sure you name all this stuff because it's going to start to get confusing here. All right, I'll go ahead and get rid of that. Let's go in and add some of the dirt down below. So we'll take this one, and I'll grab all of this, and we'll go ahead and pull that onto there. And of course, this one specifically, you're definitely not going to see in this area. And we're talking about mud that is kind of built up in this area and these cracks because these panels are here. So you're going to want to make sure that you think of that when you're doing these things. And of course, that's why we did the placement on this, just so we could get these to fit in here nicely. All right, so let's go about there. I like what we have going on down here like that. So go ahead and turn this off. We can kind of see what we have. Now, we can try some blend modes on this. I don't think anything's really going to work at this point, just because whatever we end up doing, we're always going to end up with this line coming across here. And of course, trying to brush that out, it's just going to look like you brushed it out. So this one, what we're going to do again, we're going to go in and desaturate this. We're going to jump into levels, and we're going to pull these in a little bit just so we can get some pure white. I'm pulling this down here to pure black, and I'm losing a lot of the detail. You see all this nice bumpy detail that we have in here? I don't want to pull that down so I lose all that detail. So I'll pull it to where it gets dark, but I still have a lot of that detail inside of there. So maybe somewhere around there. And then this layer, of course, we can now go in and do a multiply in it to blend that in nicely. Looks like we could actually go in and delete this edge up here to get rid of that. Make sure we don't have that in there. Maybe even a little bit in there. Okay, and I'm not really liking this black color that we have on here. And of course, again, this just depends on what this box has been through on what you're doing here. So what I will do on this, I'll go into hue saturation again, and I'm going to colorize that. And, again, we can do some nice mold on this. If this thing has been setting outside, on a back lot somewhere where it's really wet all the time, you're going to get some mold built up on there. So we'll go ahead and run with that. I kind of like how that's looking there. And we can pull opacity down on it a little bit if need be. All right, so I like that. That looks good. All right, so, there's obviously a lot more you can do with this. If you've got this much moisture, you're going to get that stuff moving down through here. We can do that really quick here. I think I've got a file in here. Let's see. All right, we'll open up this one. And we'll dump that on there. Pull that back in so we can see what it's doing. Go ahead and scale this over. And, stuff like this, stuff that's running down, you can find this all over the place. And I've reused this image for the last couple lessons, but you can find these pretty readily. All right, so that we'll go ahead and multiply that back in. Of course, we've got this line going across here that we want to get rid of. So we'll get rid of that. So that's not in there. Maybe make this a little more subtle as it comes down. Again, it's up to you. We'll call that good there. All right, one other thing that I want to do to this before we finish up with this one is I'm going to go ahead and put a sticker on this. So we'll open up a file. And I'm going to guess that this is going to be pretty small comparatively, because I have a really large texture going on here. And I think this is a pretty small image. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and scale it up for our purposes here. Of course, you're never going to want to scale things up just because you're going to pixelate them as you do. So keep that in mind when you're finding textures. But for this specific demo, I think that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and grab a circle marquee, and we'll go ahead and cut this out. Now, while you're dragging across here, of course, you can always hit the space bar to move this selection around. And we'll get that on there like so. Go ahead and select the inverse, and we'll delete that. Deselect. And it looks like I've left a little bit of white up here, which actually I think is okay. Again, you know, in the real world, nothing is perfect. In fact, I almost kind of want to push that a little further even. You know, this is a sticker that was applied to this surface. And in the real world, the printing press actually shifts around. So on this sticker, you may get a little bit of white over here because the black wasn't centered on there. So it just gives it that much more realism. Like I said, because the real world, nothing is as perfect as we try to make it in the computer, or as perfect as the computer likes to make it. So I kind of like that. And again, you know, I might even want to push that a little bit further, give it a little bit more white over there. All right, but for now, I'll go ahead and name that just so I know where it is. And we're going to go ahead and strip this away a little bit. Now, a sticker is going to work a little bit differently than paint because, again, you've got this nice mylar surface that's setting on top of the wood. That's not going to seep into the wood like this surface would. Now, I'm going to go ahead and dupe this layer just so I have a copy of it. And on our bio logo, now what we want to do is we want to start to strip some of this away. So what we need to do is we need to find something that we can use to strip it away that looks like that specific pattern. So what I have, again, you know, this is a scenario where I've gone out, shot a bunch of stuff. Actually, these specific ones that are in here, I got from a buddy of mine, Alex Lindsay, who is an artist at Industrial Light and Magic. And he has put together a CD filled with these grime maps, and you saw me use a couple of them earlier. These are really, really good grime maps. There's some really good stuff in here. So I'm going to find one that basically looks like the pattern of how that would be stripped away. And I kind of like how this is going. We're getting kind of some chips coming off of it as it's sat in the sun forever and baked. And this is actually paint on a wall, again, photographed, desaturated, and levels adjusted. But we can use this for our purposes to maybe strip some of this stuff away. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this on here. Now, I think this is going to be a little small as far as the pattern of chipping on here. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this up a bit. And we'll just get this placed on here. I'm not really sure where that's going to set. You know, if you want to place this very specifically, you can pull that down and you can see the areas that that's actually going to strip away. And, you know, honestly, I probably should have done that before I scaled this up just so I could place that a little bit better. But I'm going to find a nice little area right around there. So we'll strip that away and strip that away. You can see some areas down here that'll get stripped away as well. So we'll go ahead and do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kind of take note on where this is. Sometimes Photoshop will shift things around when I do this. So I'm going to go ahead and select all this. There's one way to avoid this. I'll show you what's going to happen here. Because this is transparent on here, you can see we're getting a lot of layers going on here. Because this is transparent in this area as opposed to this map that we have on here, it's going to want to center this if I paste it. So if I copy this and I go to channels and I make a new channel, if I paste, it's going to want to center that image inside of there. Now, if you have something very specifically placed, that's obviously not going to work out for you. So what you're going to need to do is, probably the easiest way to do this is just to make a new layer and fill that layer with something like black, and then merge this one down into it. So now I have pixels here. If I copy this and jump back into here and paste, then it's going to be setting where you want it to. So just depends on if that is very specifically placed or not. All right, so now I'll go ahead and bring this up as a selection, hide that, and we'll see what we get here. And let's make sure we're seeing RGB, of course. And I'll go ahead and just hit the delete key. And you can see we stripped that away really nice with that pattern. I really like what happened there. So, a little bit different than stripping away from the paint, just because this surface is so thick and it gets very, very brittle when it's setting in the sun. Now, one other thing that I'd like to do, let's go ahead and jump into this copy that we have here. I'm going to select that area, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this with a couple different things. First off, I'm going to go ahead and fill this with black. And we're not on that layer. That helps. So there we go. Deselect that. Now, you can see that black falls underneath where that sticker was, and it's already come up. Now, the cool thing about this is you've got this sticker that's stuck on this surface, and the sticker on the back of it has a sticky glue. Now, that sticky glue is going to obviously stick and adhere to this wood, and more than likely, when this mylar surface was in the sun, it got brittle, it chipped off. That glue probably hung around because it's not going to get brittle and chip off. So what I want to do is kind of leave just a little bit of remainder of that glue underneath there. We can try some different things. We can, pull that down. And actually, that doesn't look too bad. You can try some blend modes as well. Maybe we'll jump in here, try some of these, see what they look like. That doesn't look too bad if you want to go for a more saturated color look. Let's go with that one. I kind of like that. Now, it's a little too perfect again, so I think what I would like to do is, again, grab my wood texture, bring that up as a selection, come in here and maybe strip some of that away. It's still a little perfect like in this area, so you're going to want to either grab another map or do it to load that up to get that away. Or on top of that, I think we probably could just come in here and maybe get rid of some of this. You can always grab like your smudge brush as well and kind of smudge some of this in just to get rid of that perfect edge. It doesn't look right having that perfect edge on there. So even just wiggling that around a little bit really helps out to get rid of that perfect edge that you have going on there. I think we probably could strip away a little bit more just to give it a little bit more of an uneven appearance. Maybe even just smudge some of this in just to roughen that up a little bit. But, again, it just gives us that kind of cool appearance that some of that glue got left behind on there. All right, so, obviously there's a lot more that we could do to this thing. We could have more drips coming down here. More dirt built up, so that's kind of where we're sitting now. There's a lot more that we could do to this and a lot more time that we can spend. And on top of that, obviously, you have other panels that you would need to do here as well, but it's the same basic process. This mold that we have going on here, some of that mold is going to be down here on the bottom of this, especially this lip right here where it sticks out, where it comes out right there. So You want to make sure that you remain consistent with your textures as they go across the panels. But that basic process here, I think, works for just getting some nice grime and some grunge on this wood surface. There you go.